Das Neues Schloss, one of the last large city palaces to be built in southern Germany, is the magnificent 17th-century Baroque residence of the Kings of Württemberg from 1746 to 1797 and from 1805 to 1807. It was commissioned by the young Duke Carl Eugen, was built and modified by Nikolaus Friedrich Thouret, Leopold Retti, Philippe, Guepière, Reinhard, Heinrich, Ferdinand, Fischer.New palace stands on the south edge of the Schlossplatz in Stuttgart. In front of the new palace stands the colossal Jubiläumssäule. Adjacent to the palace stands the old castle. Public tours of the building are only permitted by special arrangement. The Schlossplatz is adjacent to two other popular squares in Stuttgart, Karlsplatz to the south and Schillerplatz to the southwest. History. Planning. In 1737, the 9-year-old Charles Eugene became Duke of Württemberg upon the death of his father Karl Alexander, Duke of Württemberg. Because he was still a minor, he was sent to study at the court of King Frederick the Great, King of Prussia, while administrators ran affairs in Württemberg. A now 16-year-old Charles returned to Stuttgart in 1744 and decided he wanted a residence befitting his royal dignity and extent of his household. Than the old palace that Duke Eberhard was established in Ludwigsburg 12 kilometers away. On the insistence of the Württemberg Diet, Charles moved the seat of his power to Stuttgart and decided to replace the old palace with a new palace to be constructed on the Schlossplatz. This was not entirely met with agreement, however. Some, like Württemberg's Oberbaudirektor Johann Christoph David Leger, argued that an expansionist to the old castle would have sufficed. Architects across Europe jumped at the chance to design the Duke's palace and submitted drafts directly to Charles, including renowned architects Alessandro Galli da Bibbiena and Maurizio Pedretti. Balthasar Neumann also submitted a draft, but was rejected. Today, architectural historians argue that had Neumann's dream been realized, he would have produced the most magnificent palace of the entire 18th century. On May 6, Charles Eugene selected 1746 board director Leopoldo Retti was selected to build the palace. He chose the grounds of an old crossbow shop in Lustgarten to be the site of the new Schloss. His plan saw a courtyard to face the nearby Karlsstuhl Stuttgart and new Lusthaus south of the palace. His design also had the garden wing facing the apartments of the ducal family that would be housed in the Kordeloge, and the city wing would contain the guest and state rooms. First phase under Leopold Retti. Construction began with the foundation of the garden wing on September 3, 1746 under the direction of Johann Christoph David Leger, as Retti was to be employed in Ansbach until 1748. In 1749, the Kordeloge and garden wing facades were completed, leaving the interiors that would be completed in 1750. When Retti began work on the foundation of the city wing, taking ideas and suggestions from other architects at this time, but died of an unknown illness on September 18, 1751. Second phase under Philippe de Guepière. After Retti's death, construction of the palace fell to a friend of his, Parisian architect Philippe de Guepière, who finished the shell of the city wing in 1752. A connoisseur of modern architectural theory, Philippe was inspired by his time in his native France and especially the magnificent palaces of Versailles, and took the palace in this direction. Under the Philippe de Guepière period, the interior of the garden wing and the totality was designed and the Kordeloge was completed. Work on Retti's porticulo and the dome on the marble hall from 1758 to 1760 saw both feature arches completed. During the night of November 13 to November 14, 1762, a fire broke out in the garden wing, resulting in a conflagration that destroyed the interior to the garden wing that Philippe de Guepière had finally finished. An annoyed Duke Charles Eugen transferred de Guepière the construction of the city wing's interior. February 11, 1763 saw the first major event in the new palace. Duke Charles Eugen celebrated his birthday in the nearly completed city wing. The celebrations did not last. That same year de Guepière attempted to repair the damage but failed due to finance issues and the failing interest of the Duke. Disputes between the Duke, the Vienna Reichshof, and the estates saw construction halted in 1764, and the Duke moved his residence back to Ludwigsburg Palace. In 1768, de Guepière left the Duke's court and returned to Paris. In 1775, the Duke returned to Stuttgart and hired Reinhard, Heinrich, Ferdinand, Fischer to repair the palace. 1775 also saw the arrival of Tsar Paul I of Russia and his wife Sophia Dorothea of Württemberg, one of Carl Eugen's nieces. The central pavilion of the Marble Hall in the Cour de Logis decorated with a fresco by Nicolas Guepière. Third phase under Nikolaus Friedrich Thouret. When Charles Eugen died in 1793, new palace was given some much-needed repairs. 1789 saw the completion of the city wing and the garden wing in 1791 during the rule of Frederick II Eugene, Duke of Württemberg. In 1806, as the palace was finally nearing completion, Napoleon Bonaparte visited the new palace. 11 years later, von Thouret redecorated some of the rooms of the Red Marble Hall during the visit of Tsar Alexander I. When Duke and then King Frederick I died, William I moved the seat of his power back to the new palace and hired Giovanni Sallucci and later his pupil Ferdinand Gabriel and charged them with renovating the palace's grey and yellow marble halls in 1836. In 1840 and 1841 and from 1852 to 1854, the court painter Joseph Anton Gegenbauer painted 3 frescoes rooms created next to the staircase on the ground floor with scenes from the history of the Duchy and the Kingdom of Württemberg. Under Duke Charles I and his wife Olga, only minor changes were made to the castle, mainly made in the royal living area and by Joseph von Egge were executed. William II renounced the residency of the dukes in the new palace, and the palace was somewhat open to the public for the first time. After Wilhelm II abdicated his throne on November 30, 1918, the palace passed into state ownership. In 1919, the German Foreign Institute used the ground floor and some of the garden wing to house their offices and showrooms, and some of the first and second floors became the headquarters for the local police. In the early 1920s, nearly the entire first floor became a museum displaying the Royal Kunstkammer, Mallorca collection, and former living places of the Kings of Württemberg. When the German Foreign Institute moved out in 1928, the remaining unused portions of the palace were converted into German military and ancient antiquity museums. When the police headquarters moved out in 1926, the second floor housed the offices of the Antiquities Collection and Historic Preservation Authorities. The World War II air raids on February 21, 1944. Neues Schloss was almost completely burned to the ground by Allied bombs, leaving only the facade standing. For many years, preservationists fought to rebuild Neues Schloss until 1957, when finally it was agreed in the Baden-Württemberg Landtag that the castle would be rebuilt by one vote. Since the reconstruction that began in 1958 under the careful direction of Horst Lind, the castle has been used by the state's government, starting with the cour de logis and the two wings of the castle. The only part of the castle that was not fully restored was an air raid shelter under the building that was demolished in 1958. Today it is used by the state ministries of finance and education and is now open to the public via regular guided tours. Trivia: former German President Richard von Weizsäcker was born here on April 15, 1920. Baden-Württemberg's Ministry of Culture, Youth and Sport was based here until 2012. Gallery.